reality TV, it's like everyone's guilty pleasure, isn't it? All that
Yeah.
drama, the big personalities, like getting that little peek into the world of all the wealth and fame. But what happens when they stop filming? When all that perfect image they show us falls apart?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. It's the whole Chrisley saga.
Okay.
A story that takes us from that seemingly perfect world that we saw on Chrisley Knows Best to a totally different place. Federal prison.
It's really something,
Yeah.
It really shows you just how appealing that image in reality TV is, but also how dangerous it can be.
Right.
I mean, the Chrisleys, all their Southern charm, that lavish lifestyle, they got over 2 million viewers. They
Wow.
really gave this picture of success. Like, it was all built on their real estate stuff, even
Yeah.
moving from Atlanta to Nashville in season 4, to try and show everyone how well they were doing.
Yeah, it was more than just the houses though. It was clothes, the cars, like the whole thing.
Yeah.
It felt like aspirational viewing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But it makes you wonder how much of it was actually real.
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting, because in 2019, right when the show was super popular,
Mm-hmm.
Todd and Julie Chrisley, they got indicted on tax evasion charges in Georgia.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And this wasn't just like, a small mistake. They were accused of bank fraud, wire fraud conspiracy.
Wow.
They supposedly got over $30 million in loans they weren't supposed to have.
30 million.
Yeah, to pay for that crazy lifestyle.
It's hard to even imagine, all of that happening behind the scenes. They're filming the show, smiling for the cameras, trying to show everyone this picture of a successful, happy family.
It definitely makes you wonder about how real any of it is on reality TV.
Right.
Like, are we, the viewers, just being tricked into believing a story?
Mm-hmm.
And what does it say about us that we love watching all this wealth and celebrity? Like, why are we so easily drawn in?
It's so true. We see these amazing lifestyles on screen, and I think some people start to think that that's normal,
Yeah.
even something to aim for.
Right.
But the Chrisleys, they're a huge reminder that things aren't always what they seem.
Exactly. And this wasn't just them hiding some money from the IRS. Their accountant, Peter Tarantino, he was also involved.
Oh, wow.
Which means this wasn't something they just decided to do one day. They planned this.
Mm.
And that's kind of scary.
It really makes you wonder what they were thinking back then. Like, did they think they would get away with it, or were they just so focused on keeping up appearances that they didn't think about, what would happen?
It's hard to say, really, but it does raise some interesting questions about what happens to people when they get rich and famous. Like, do they start to feel like they're above the law or something?
That's almost like a classic story, right? Like they got too big for their britches.
Yeah, something like that.
And what's even crazier is that even with all those serious charges, Chrisley Knows Best kept going.
I know.
They got renewed for a 10th season. They had spin-offs in the works. It was almost like the network didn't even care about all the legal stuff.
That's right. I mean, just a couple of days before the trial, E! announced a new dating show hosted by Todd Chrisley. Love Lemo, they called it.
It's bizarre. Here they are, about to maybe go to prison for serious crimes, and they're still getting all these chances in the entertainment world. It makes you really question, the ethics of all this reality TV stuff and the networks. What's their role in all of this?
Yeah, it does raise some big ethical questions. Are they part of the problem? Like, are they helping to create this culture of wealth and fame, even if it's built on lies?
Right.
Are they just using these people for entertainment, not even thinking about the consequences?
And what about us? The
Yeah.
people watching, are we contributing to this by tuning in and watching these shows? It's a tricky situation.
It really is. But one thing's for sure, it all came crashing down.
Mm-hmm.
June 2022, the Chrisleys, they were found guilty. And that perfect world they built, it disappeared. Their shows, they were canceled. And they had to face the very real possibility of prison time.
Yeah, it makes you think about that whole thing. Money can't buy happiness.
Yeah.
It seems like maybe for them, trying to get all that money actually ruined them.
That's a really good point. And you see that all the time, not just with reality TV people, but everywhere.
Right.
Like, everyone wants to look successful, but it can be like a dangerous thing to chase. So, okay, let's talk about the sentences they got.
Okay.
Todd got 12 years and Julie got 7. That's a long time, especially
Mhm.
considering how they were living before.
It is. Todd started his time at the Federal Medical Center in Pensacola. And Julie, she was originally going to be at a federal prison camp in Marianna, Florida. But then they moved her to a federal medical center in Kentucky.
Oh, why did they move her? Was there a reason? It's not really clear from the information we have.
Okay.
Some people think maybe it was for her health or maybe even security reasons.
Mm.
But it's kind of strange that they don't say why. Just adds to the mystery of the whole thing.
Yeah, it does. And it makes you think about the whole prison system, We hear about people getting sentenced, but we don't really see what it's like in there.
That's true. And it's important to remember that even though the Chrisleys are famous and everyone's talking about them,
Right.
there are tons of other people in prison for white-collar crimes, and we never hear their stories.
That's a good point. It makes you wonder if the punishment always fits the crime, especially when it comes to money stuff. Like, do we treat white-collar criminals the same way we treat violent criminals?
That's a tough question. People have been arguing about that for a long time. Some people say white-collar crimes are just as bad as violent crimes, maybe even worse.
Yeah, because they can hurt a lot of people, right?
Exactly. They can cause huge financial problems, like for regular people, businesses, even whole communities.
And with the Chrisleys, it wasn't just about them. They were hurting the banks and basically everyone because of how the financial system works.
Right, but then some people say, well, white-collar criminals shouldn't get the same punishments as violent criminals because they're not physically hurting anyone.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue for sure. And the Chrisley case really makes you think about all those different sides.
Hmm.
But even with all that, it felt like their story was over. They were guilty, they got sentenced, they were serving their time.
You would think, right? But, with the Chrisleys, there's always something else going on.
Right.
And just when you thought things couldn't get any crazier, well, they did.
You're talking about Julie getting out early, right?
Yep.
She only served 18 months, and then they overturned her sentence. Nobody saw that coming.
I know. It's a total shock. The court, they said, okay, we still think they're guilty, but we messed up on how we calculated her sentence. And they also thought she wasn't as involved in all the fraud stuff.
Wow.
So basically, they said she shouldn't have gone to prison at all.
That's crazy. It makes you think about the whole justice system. Like, are there problems with how they do things? Are there other people in prison who shouldn't be there?
It's possible. And what happened to Julie shows that we need to look really closely at the legal system and make sure things are fair. It's a good reminder that sometimes the system gets things wrong, and even when they figure it out, it might be too late.
And it's interesting that Julie got out right around the same time that Todd got fired from his prison job.
Oh, yeah, he was working as a chaplain's assistant.
Right.
And his lawyer said he was really upset about it. He felt like, they did him wrong. It's strange how Julie's getting her freedom back and Todd's things are getting worse.
It does make you wonder if there's more to the story. Why did they fire him? Was it because of his case, or was it something else?
It's hard to know for sure,
Yeah.
but it definitely makes things more interesting. And it reminds us that even in prison, there are still rules and people in charge, and all that stuff can affect how you experience being there.
And it's like, as if all of that wasn't enough, there's one more thing that really throws a wrench into the whole story.
Okay.
Remember how we were talking about how much power these celebrities have?
Yeah.
And how they can use their platforms? Well, it turns out the Chrisleys aren't done with the spotlight just yet.
Oh, are you talking about Savannah Chrisley at the Republican National Convention?
Yeah. Like, a month after Julie got out, Savannah was up on stage at the RNC.
Wow.
Not just supporting Donald Trump, but also talking about prison reform. It was a pretty big move, and it connected what happened to her family to a much bigger issue. I mean, you don't see that every day, do you?
Yeah.
Going from, like, reality TV stars to convicted felons to talking about prison reform at a huge event like that, it's a lot.
Yeah. It really shows you how powerful personal experience can be, Like Savannah Chrisley could have just disappeared after everything that happened. But she chose to use her platform to talk about something that's really important to her and her family.
Yeah. And it adds a whole other layer to the whole Chrisley story, right? Like, it makes you wonder if this whole thing changed them, like if they see the world differently now.
It's definitely possible. I mean, they went from having all this money and living this amazing life to seeing how the justice system really works.
Right.
And that can change a person.
Yeah.
Makes you think about what's really important.
So knowing everything we know now, like about their legal problems and the prison stuff, does it change how we see their time on Chrisley Knows Best? Was it all fake? Just a show for the cameras?
It's a good question. Did they believe all the stuff they were saying, or did they know it was all a lie?
Yeah.
It's hard to say for sure, but it reminds us that reality TV, it's not always real. It's edited. They want to make it entertaining for us.
It's all about telling a story, right?
Yeah.
And for the Chrisleys, that story was all about being rich and successful. But we know now that it wasn't the whole truth. It was darker than that.
It is. It's like it's a cautionary tale, right? About what happens when you start to believe all the good stuff people say about you. When you get lost in trying to be famous and rich. It reminds you that what you do matters, no matter who you are.
So where do the Chrisleys go from here? Julie's out, Todd's still in prison, and Savannah's out there trying to make things better. What do you think happens next?
Who knows? I mean, can they put their lives back together after all this? Will they use what happened to them to help other people? Or will they just kind of fade away? We'll just have to wait and see.
It's a wild story, isn't it? Full of surprises. You never know what's going to happen next, and it's not over yet.
It's a story that makes you think about a lot of things, like how we feel about money and fame and the American dream. It makes you question what's important. And I think the story's going to keep going for a while.
Yeah. And for anyone who's really into all this, and let's be honest, it's hard not to be.
Right.
There's a new podcast called Chrisley Knows Prison. They're keeping up with everything that's happening. So check that out if you want to know all the latest.
It's because one thing we've learned from the Chrisleys is that real life can be way crazier than anything you see on TV.
Right.
Their story shows us that behind all those perfect pictures and videos we see online, there are real people. People with problems and choices to make and things that happen to them that they didn't expect.
It's a reminder that even though everyone tries to look perfect online, the truth always comes out eventually.
And sometimes the truth is more dramatic, more shocking, and more interesting than anything we could ever make up.
So keep digging deeper, everyone. And remember, the best stories are sometimes the ones happening right in front of us.